Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do video 2 of a short series that we've put together on OAuth and the Google Drive API. Most of the concepts you'll be able to use in other APIs, other manufacturers as well. Okay, right, so what we'll do is we'll demonstrate in this video how to get the refresh and the bearer tokens. Now we need those so you can actually use the API. I'll show the code. It'll be up in a repo at the end of the series when I've written all the code and got it all debugged and everything should be okay for that. We're not going to talk about OAuth 2 in depth. Lots and lots of videos on YouTube about that. It's a reasonably mature protocol now. I'm going to give you a link to a book which was published in 2017. It's a guy called Jeffrey Richer. I think it's OAuth 2 in action. Pretty good book, but very expensive because it's very limited appeal really. So you won't find it for a $5 on the marketplace. Oh, you might find a second-hand bookshop. I don't know. Anyway, so yes, we'll do that, and I'll put another couple of links in there as well, probably about some other videos that are useful to do that. So just a quick recap in case you haven't seen video 1 or you don't need that kind of depth. What we did was we created a Google project, and that creates the app. OAuth talks in terms of apps. That's what you use to get all your endpoint credentials, IDs, and whatever. They're all held under there. What APIs you've used. So I've created one. It's called YT Demo 20, and it only uses the Google Drive API. For this demonstration, I've given it the whole permissions to it. Just makes it a bit easier, to go through. But you should really only give the permissions or the scopes, as OAuth 2 calls it. You should only give those that are necessary for your actual application. Right, we've got a few files to go through as well. I didn't show this one, I showed the OAuth parameters one. So these are the client ID. So these are all, apart from client name, I've just put that in so you can see what it is. But the client ID, secret, the redirect scheme, host, port, all of those, excuse me, are standard stuff. The prompt that shows when you've probably seen how you log into OAuth. What is an OAuth 2 enabled app? When it pops up the screen, username, password. Could be Google, could be Microsoft, could be anybody, Facebook, whatever. These are the scopes. This sort of going to say, yeah, I want to use the OAuth. Sorry, I want to authorize to use Drive, which is the Google Drive API. These are just standard ones you put in there. We will talk maybe in the next video about JSON Web Tokens as well, or JWTs or JOTs as sometimes called. We can get more information by specifying OpenID, which drives the creation of the JOT, get the profile, get the email. So we get a bit more detail about the end user to go through. Okay. So we'll talk now about how the actual code works that I've put together. You always need endpoints when using OAuth 2 and the APIs. It's fairly standard, but of course you do need specific ones for Google. You need specific ones for Microsoft, so you would put extra ones in there. You'd have another key for Facebook and whatever, so we'd go through that. So you can see here, we authenticate against the accounts product. You get your token from OAuth 2, and to use the APIs, Google APIs, all of the Google APIs have that as a prefix. It's similar to Microsoft Graph API, where everything has a common front end now. You're not running around finding different endpoints and whatever. You have it there, so that we have that there. So we have to set that up, and we'll read that in the code so we can point to the right directions. So auth parameters, we have to string these together in various ways for the application to work. The redirect host is the interesting one, the three of them there. Because we're doing a local processing here, and I'm not going out into another website to do this, as you normally will be a web application. And I initially started this series of videos to get a code to upload some files directly from a command prompt in Windows, which I could use various SDKs and whatever. But I thought, no, we'll have some fun. We'll do some videos. Code, that is the kind of path, if you like. I'm asking it to give me an access code, and I'm going to use that somewhere else, which again we'll show through that. There are different values for things when you use single page applications, JavaScript applications. Use that. If you say access type is offline, that means that the code can work on behalf of you when you're not there. It's the only way to return the refresh token. If you don't have a refresh token, that defaults to online. You have that, and that just means that whenever you want to use it, if the token expires, it only lasts an hour, you have to be logged in and have to re-authenticate. So through what we're doing here, we have offline, we have the code, and we can work with it as long as we like, because I've written into the utility code the refresh to keep on calling that. So we're never in a situation where we need to re-authenticate. You might using the unpublished apps in Google. I think they might only have 7 days, but normally they last about 6 months. So you'd get an error back, and you'd have to redirect the user to the authentication screen. But again, it's all in the in-depth documentation for the Google APIs to do that. So the code we're going to look at is what I've called OAuth2 client. So we do some work here. We'll need to start a browser. That's a very interesting activity. We're going to implement a little web server. I call it a web server. It's just an HTTP listener. And this exchange author token, I've used that quite a few times around other pieces of code. That's what swaps that code. When I mentioned code there in the auth parameters, when you specify code and you get this code back, that's what you swap for the real access token and the refresh token as well. It's a very useful piece of code. Without that, nothing would work. So what we'll do now is we'll have a quick run of the OAuth2 client code, and then we'll walk through this and we'll see what it's doing. So just to run it, so we have OAuth2 client. Right, so we're just going to give some room here. You can see what's going on. So this is the URL it's requesting from Google. Now, say normally in web application you wouldn't see this, and I'm just showing this for demonstration purposes. So starting the browser is quite interesting because on Windows 11 I had to go and find the default browser, and there is no documented way to do that. So it was a bit of a hassle really to do that. So I've changed it now so we can just start the application by using the start command in CMD. Get a little more time, actually go and actually find out the proper way where the browser is. You're almost certain to have Edge running on the machine. If you're not, well, you have to install Edge or Chrome, whatever, but that's just something to do for the future. So having sent that, so we fired that off, we set to Windows, do something, so it says, yeah, I'll start the default browser anyway, which is Chrome in this case. And it says, right, you need to log in. So that's the demo I created. So we go back to there on the auth parameters. That's a bit of just some rubbish that sometimes Google puts on the end, sometimes it doesn't. So we just go back to the to here really. So that's the only account I've got in here. So I could actually add another one, but you have to name the accounts. If you're not published as an app, you have to name the accounts, which it's fair enough really, and it's just their rules to do that. And if you look in video 1, you'll see more detail about that. So we choose that. We say yeah, not verified yet, which is fair enough. We're in development, so we can either just bail out now or we'll continue. Say yeah, I'm going to continue because I know what's going on here. So you can continue. So yeah, you're signing into YT demo. So this is saying what the scopes of actually will result in. If we just see that data. So yeah, we're quite happy with that. So you choose that. So you can play around with it, reduce the remove credentials, whatever you can do that. So we'll just say continue, and there we are. Because I've used this before, so you've already got some services. So yeah, fine. It always gives you all the outs really, so you can find out what's going on. That's probably worthwhile reading in some applications, but we're under control. We know what we're doing here. So we'll say continue. So what's happened now is the work has been done. So we'll just move that to one side for a second, and we'll have a look back at the command prompt and see what happened. So I've put some displays in here. So that's the URL we sent off to Google. So you remember we were sat there. The little web server is now sat there saying, yeah, I'll wait for something to come in. Google sends it back. So how how that actually works is when you send off that URL and you fired up the browser, that goes off to Google and says, yeah, do all the screens you have to do. So it could be multi-factor authentication, could be anything in there. When you say it's okay, because if you think about how browsers work, they give they ask for a URL, they get a response back. So if you were looking at the Amazon web page, you'd send it off, you say, search for these books, and it come back and say, yeah, I found these books, and you go on like that. Sometimes you need to go to a completely different page with it. So within HTTP, you send, I think it's an HTTP response of 302, which is moved temporarily, and you also send a header back, which has location in, which is the URL you want to go to. So what happens here is we're actually sending that location here. So we're saying our redirect URI is this localhost. That's, if you remember those parameters in the file, localhost 15678. We'll just go back there. So that's saying, yeah, send off the request to Google. You type your answers in, it comes back, says I'm fine. When it shows you to fine, it actually says, yes, now the browser says, oh, I've got to acknowledge that redirect now. So it takes the 302, it says, oh, I'll go to that redirect URL, which is our little web server which is listening. It's simple really to request response. It's how most internet protocols work. So we get that back. Now state, what you can do is you can actually create state in there, so so you would identify that coming back, and because somebody could just send you a request. If you're in a real website, it's not going to work here, but a real website, you could just send a request. So you have to give that request, that state, so you can read it back and say, yes, I know it was me that sent that. Because we said code, it returns the code. Now this is the value we need really, and we'll look at that in a tick. So that's the code we get back. It then tells you some information that it's decided you need to know. So you might not have given consent for all of the APIs, all the scopes you want to use. So it'll send back here the scopes it used. So what your code should do then is read those scopes and say, actually, I need a particular scope. User didn't authenticate, I can't work. So you handle that gracefully by doing that. We have these other things which we looked at before, which is the profile, user info, email. That was all the good stuff about JWT. We spoke about that. And I've also put in that I want you to do a prompt. I want you to do a consent every time. That's just for debugging, really, because normally you would do this. And I think if OAuth 2 says, oh, you're already logged in, Google says, you're already logged in, don't need to request you again. It'll just return the token. So that will be invisible to you, but that wouldn't be a very interesting demo to do that. So I just decided to show you all this. I've no option where I could parse them out, but this is a single response back from the web services. Yeah, got all this. So there's all your nice headers, and see what Google sent back. And then when we exchange the token for a real access token, I've all shown you what comes back there as well. As I say, this is the exchange auth for token part. So it's actually, you pass in this code parameter. Where are we? You pass in code, and it returns these. So we get the access token. That's the one you use to actually execute the APIs. Refresh token that's the one you need to keep secret. They talk about it being more secure, but it's like you're using a password. If you keep those very secure, nobody will ever break into your application. But it's the same here. If you don't keep this refresh token secure, they can break into your application. If somehow this gets trapped, you've only got an hour. 3,599 seconds, which is basically an hour to do that. There's our scopes, and this is the ID token. This is the JSON Web Token, the JWT. You can normally tell it is by seeing the EY at the start. That's just because it's base 64 encoded, and we know what's going on in there. So then we do that. See it all done. So not a big issue. Just for completeness. In the next one, we will talk more about the client code. So I think it's called run query. .php, and I've done this. So you give the API name. It actually prepends that. See, all the Google APIs are there. So let's come back here, we do that, and we send. There we go. So there is only 2 files within this application, within my, within the drive. Those 2 guys there. You see that. So there we are, spreading in a new doc and do that. Now, when you use version 2 of the API, you get a lot more detail back. You get a lot more information there. Version 3, I think they decided, well, there's probably not much point giving everybody that. It slows it down. You need to be able to. It's just more efficient, really, to do that. So what you can do these days with version 3, you do files and you can specify fields. So you can say fields equals star. You can list them individually. So that's basically the same as you got from version 2. We could restrict it. I think is it name? Just say I just want the name. So it isn't that. You got to keep your mind alert when you're using these APIs. Oh, wasn't name. Right, let's just have a look at that. So a bit of live debugging and do that. It's probably because it's in files, right? So it's actually in a collection called files. So we can do files name. Get rid of that. Spell it correctly. And there we are. So we just see the name of that. We could give it another one, say comma ID. There we go. So we do that. So that's just a little view of what we actually use these tokens for. So if we have a little look at the code now, just PHP. I always do it in PHP. So there just includes the sub-process we need to do. One of which is we need to exchange the code. If you remember that when we got the code back from Google, that you can only use that once as well. So if your code fails and you try to rerun it with that code, it'll fail. You'll need to re-authenticate to get that. We also need to start off the browser. And we also need a little web server which will sit and listen to the code, waiting for that back, which we saw in the demonstration how we did that. So the code, so we just include that. We have some endpoints. We grab everything that we need. We create it all pretty standard stuff. We'll get the parameters file, which is the one we saw here, which has all the client IDs and whatever. So we pull that in. We'll just break that out. We get all that out, just normal JSON processing in here. Because we have spaces in the prompt and scopes, we have to URL encode them. So just put a %20 in there. You could put a plus sign, and that'll work equally well. For state as well, someone said when you issue the state, because somebody might be trying just to invoke your code, to try to hack you or whatever. So you check that state is what you sent. So I've just MD5'd it with a couple of random numbers, so that should be fine. But we're not actually using it in this, but it's just there for the demonstration purposes. And nearly all internet protocols, especially HTTP, it likes to have a carriage return a new line at the end. Sometimes it likes 2. We have examples of that in here. So once we've got all that data, we then need to start the browser. So passing all those parameters, we could do that. We could have stringed it out, but I actually do need to use some of these parameters within the start the browser code. So we invoke that. We build up the string. So if you remember, that's the string that we saw when we actually issued the command. So that does that. Browser opens. There's all the good stuff like the redirect URL. Unfortunately, there's not really a way within PHP to start things asynchronously. So if you exec a command, it'll wait until that command finishes. So that's exactly what I don't need to happen here. We need to start the browser asynchronously, then start the web server to listen to it. So if you use start, which is a command which most people will know about in Windows, where you actually start it, and because that start succeeds, it will return immediately. So that's how you can mimic the asynchronous activity. Linux has probably got far better ways to do that. I think in Linux you do an ampersand on the end of the command, and that returns immediately. But this is Windows, so we're stuck with Windows. And I don't like using things which require extra bits of code. Just use the native tools we've got, So we do that. We get the browser. We saw that start up. Came back, so that's the end of what we're doing there. Back to here. So we wait for that to come back. So when it comes back, we start the web server. So we're sitting here waiting most of the time. When we saw the listening, that's what it's doing there. It's just basically a socket server listener. So it's just sits there. I've got this Evernote PHP book, so I just manipulated that so it actually did pretend to be HTTP. Where are we now? So yeah, handling errors. So you basically you iterate forever. You're just waiting for sockets to come in. So you get a connection. So that's the browser saying, yeah, I want to do something. As soon as that happens, you actually fire off another socket. So this socket here just sits there waiting for all the other connections. I think I specified 100. You can have open connections at once. Where are we? It's around here somewhere. Yes, a backlog. So you can have 100 there. So it's far too many, but I just put that in. So, yep. So there's our point of listening. We do the listen, and we start firing off these new sockets to do that. When the browser does issue the command, when you use the browser, it actually says HTTP protocol. It says to the back end, to the HTTP server, which in this case is Google, says give me some information. So it comes, the screen comes back, you fill all the things in, then you hit the OK. That then ports that back to Google. Google said that's OK, and as part of the response, the HTTP, it sets the HTTP headers to 302, response type to 302, which is moved temporarily, and it also sets another header called location, which is the URL it wants to redirect you to. So that is actually where we have our little local host. So as I say, when you fill in the details, you hit the send, off it goes to Google, does its thing, says yeah, you're fine, comes back. When it gives the response back to the browser to render, it doesn't actually render anything. It just says, oh yeah, I've got that 302, I need to go and redirect. So off it goes. You see this happening all the time in web service. Sometimes you'll enter a form and it'll just go backwards and forwards until you get a correct error processing. When the back end thinks it's okay, it then will probably issue a redirect, a location command within the PHP. That will actually send the browser. So it all happens, the redirect happens in the browser. That sends you off to another page. But here, you're running on a local PC, you've got a local host run, it's fine. It's exactly how it's meant to work. And that's how we do it. There are other ways of getting the codes, the tokens, with things like Postman, but it's another tool you got to learn. And I thought, well, I'll try and do as much as I can here. So a little web server. So the web server, when the browser returns, it actually, when it starts off, the first thing it does is oh yeah, I'll go and ask for fav icon. You always see that.
Is when we pick up
we
this
are not
code
going to use that. So
parameter,
if
we know it's
the
there, we're going to
response line
return back and
contains
say, yeah, the
fav
web
icon,
service finished.
we're going to ignore it.
You have to
What we
really
do
return
to get
something back to the
fact
browser.
it says
to say,
code,
look, I've done that.
because
So
that's
that's
part
how
of the
the web
URL string.
strings
So I've
work.
said, well,
So
if
this is what this
code is
compact
there,
message function
we're going to
does.
assume it's
So we
correct.
just send
It
back
comes
the
back. So
HTTP.
it returns
The
that long
standard
line
code. So yeah,
back
200
to the
it was
calling
fine.
code.
Its content type is HTML. Tell it how long the body is, and the message we set up is there we are. Yes, I think I've got the coding closet, and that's what you see displayed. Because we've actually displayed it as HTML, you could put style sheets in there, whatever you wanted to do, so that wouldn't be a problem. So if we go back to the calling code, that's what we have here when we print the response. So we have to get that code out. So again, we'll call another procedure, simple piece of code to parse a response, and we get the response out. We get the code, and that's exactly what we want. That just passes it back as an array. That's when we have to do this exchange for tokens. So we've got this authorization code. That's when we swap it over. So it's a different endpoint. So it's a token URL. Give it the code. We have to give the client ID. This is when we give it the client secret. So this is the first time it ever gets used. It doesn't get used again actually. So it needs to have those URLs as well, the port somewhere where it's going. I could have sent it in as one large string, but I thought I'll send it in part. And that's scope again, so you can test that. So we'll send the scope and bring it back. So we display the tokens when we run the demonstration. We just get a set an array to this, just a PHP, just to create the string. We'll encode it into the JSON that we need into the time. So we get time, which is the current time.
because unfortunately, we need to put that time in and say how far things have expired, so we get that hour. So we interpret that, and that's where we get this. So you don't get back the response in the text to say I created this at this particular time. So I've just put another little piece in here for debugging, really. So it'll say things like Thursday and the date in UK format, just because that's how PHP does that. So the array comes back. This is an array. When we use JSON encode, it takes an array and it actually gives a file of JSON back in that buffer. We stick that in our local file. That's what we need. So that's the file we'll read in the future when we need to use it. Known as using the run query command. We get the code back. So we do that. Code is in here. We'll just have a look before we go. So it is just another curl call. We do that again. There we create the URL that we need to post, except we actually post it rather than get it this time. The reason for that is because the browser is considered insecure. That's why they're split into two sides, really. When you get that access token, it's only used once. It's just somebody can't do a replay attack and get that code. So what we do here is we actually do it server side to get that code. That's why it's a post. So it's not flying across browsers and wherever. It's done over what you hope is a fairly secure channel between you and, in this example, Google. We get that response back, of course, then we decode it. And we take out the tokens. So we get that again, expires in, refresh token, the scope. We'll build it all up, and that's where we returned it. So when we were in the OAuth client, that's what returns from here. That's that tokens command. So we just put that in files, so we can use that later. The jot file, we won't talk about that in this video, so we put that in. There's also granted scopes, which is the one which says, well, you've asked for these scopes, but I'm actually only going to give you these. So if your code needs that, I thought we'll just put those in little files so we can use that. And also the refresh token. That's the one that we need to keep secure all the time. So we do that. So that goes in its own little file in the refresh from token file. And then just to make sure we're done. And that's what we saw. So the only function we're going to reuse really here is that parse response, which is where we did that up there. So that's where we get that response back from Google. And we take the scopes out because we need that. Do all the clever explosions. Ode, that's just to make the substring work correctly. It should say code really, but ode's a better thing to do. And we take the code out, and that's how we return that value, and it comes back in there. So a bit of a rushed walk through some code. So if anybody wants to look through PHP code, they're welcome to. As I say, we'll put this into a repo and put that online at the end of the next video. I think is the third one, where I don't think I'll do another one after that. But all the code will be there for you to have a look and reuse if you wish. So that's it for today, guys. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.